I really don't have an intro planned or anything for this, so I'm just going to wing it. But here are 10 incredible albums that are at least 20, no, not at least, they are 20 years old now. And starting off with my list, I got the GOAT, one of the metalcore GOATs and one of the most pioneering metalcore albums ever to exist. Bullet for My Valentine with The Poison. So actually, this record came out in 2006 in the US, but it actually got released October 3rd, 2005 in the UK. So it's technically 2005, but yeah, this is one of the most goated albums ever.
Let's go! Let's go!
So we were talking about how we're like missing solos in a lot of modern metal. Well, fuck, man, this song's all about it.
Let's go!
Such a good record, dude. Yeah, but honestly, it was this song that made me love the band, because I think, yeah, I first discovered them through Burnout Revenge or Burnout 3. I forget the exact Burnout, but it's that racing game where you're like supposed to crash into like your opponents. Anyway, this song came on and like 15-year-old me would just like crank it every time. Yeah, Need for Speed Most Wanted. That, man, the soundtrack to that game was fucking goated, dude. It was so good. Same with Burnout Revenge, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I feel like a lot of modern games today are not including so many like awesome soundtracks. But we got like Doom with a lot of McGordon. That's been huge for the metal scene. But the soundtracks are gone, man. They're gone. Who said Kezia? Someone? Oh, Coop Sounds. Coop Sounds with Protest the Hero, Kezia. Dude, this is one of the most pivotal albums for me. Like, you can't see it, but I literally have the tattoo of the album art on my shoulder, which is this flower. But I remember when I was 12 years old, this local band in my area called Protest the Hero, they originally were called Happy Go Lucky. They were punk rock. They were fun. They were like punk rock with like riffs. But then out of nowhere, they dropped their first debut album, which was metalcore or post-hardcore or progressive. I didn't know all those terms back then. So my 15-year-old brain was just mind blown to what I was hearing, because this was my first dose of like progressive metalcore. And it's dictated how I view music today, like in terms of structure and riffs and things that I enjoy about music. This is still one of my favorite records of all time. But it starts off like this. Actually, this is the remastered version. It's hard to find the original on YouTube with good quality. But if you rewind the CD, because back in the day we had CDs, you actually got the piano intro. So this was like a hidden little track originally. But in the remastered, they just kind of play the piano part. That's another thing, man. We don't get those cool kind of like Easter eggs in albums today. The crazy part too is that they were 17 years old when they were writing this. They were so fucking young, so ambitious. It's unlike anything else too. I know by today's standards, production or tones or even like guitar playing might seem a little bit outdated, but keep in mind this is 2005, and again, they wrote this when they were 17 years old. Heretics and Killers still has like one of the sickest intros to a song that I've ever heard. And that sweep, the bass coming through too. I don't know if this is true, but I've always felt like the acoustic to like metal is inspired by System of a Down. Maybe it was just a lot of the bands were doing it back in the day, but they would go like switch back and forth from acoustics to something more metal, and that shit was awesome.
But
the lyrics in this record are so fucking sick too. Again, the fact that they wrote this when they were so young blows my mind. We got Blindfolds Aside. This is the original album art and how it looks with color. Yeah, good mix of punk, metal, prog. There's still nothing quite like it. Next record that I have, this is another goated record, man. Avenged Sevenfold with City of Evil. I'll be honest, when this record came out, I hated it. Because Avenged Sevenfold, Waking the Fallen was like my fucking record back in the day. I loved Unholy Confessions when they were more metalcore and like had some like hardcore kind of elements in the music. I loved it. Then with this record, they went like mainstream, sounded like Guns N' Roses a little bit. Couldn't do it. And then it took me, I don't know, a decade later to kind of understand it, that holy shit, I'm an idiot. This record's amazing. Yeah, even Wikipedia, this album abandons the band's metalcore sound. I agree with Genty. I think their last album was cool. It's very weird. It's out there, but I respect the fact for a band like Avenged Sevenfold, who are one of the biggest metal bands to actually write something like that and not do the more conventional prog metal music that they're known for, you know? Definitely, it's a record that still sounds good today in terms of production. Like Protest the Hero Kezia, yeah, I get it. It's outdated. The remastered version is cool. But with City of Evil, no, don't even touch it. It still sounds fucking good today. What else sounds really good is BT Bam with Alaska. The fact that this record is 20 years old now too kind of blows my mind. This is another pivotal band for me where the guitar work really influenced my playing, but also just kind of made me appreciate heavier, proggier music. This intro to Alaska is fucking nuts on guitar. Yeah, Paul Wagner I always consider him to be one of the most underrated guitarists in the metal scene, because not only is he crazy with his sweeps and the technical kind of playing, but it's his way of seamlessly intertwining jazz, country, and different genres into his playing style that makes him so incredibly unique too. But yeah, Alaska came out in 2005. I remember the first time I heard this record was at HMV. I remember at HMV, I listened to this record because you were able to like test out the records back in the day. And I'm listening to it, and the girl, she's kind of hot too. She was saying like, this record's so good. I'm like, okay. Trying to like wanting to really like it because like, oh, maybe I had a little bit of a crush on her. So I'm listening to it. I pussied out because it was too heavy for me. And I had to tell her, I'm like, I'm sorry, it's too heavy for me. And then I walked out with like a tail between my legs, man. But then I realized I'm an idiot. I grew up and I learned to appreciate the heaviness of this record. But yeah, Selkies, The Endless Obsession. This is awesome too. God, that intro is so good. The entire song is so good. A very underrated song in their catalog is called Backwards Marathon. It starts off really heavy and chaotic, but the middle portion gets into like 70s prog rock. It's pretty cool. Again, another record that is aged like fine wine. Next up, the actual album that inspired this live stream and this video, August Burns Red with Thrill Seeker. So I literally just did an album reaction review to the remastered version with Jake on vocals, which is on Patreon, patreon.com/metalbirb. But August Burns Red, another goated metalcore band. Man, it's making me realize, because I literally just listened to the re-recorded version, I might actually like this a little bit more. There's something about the rawness and the production that I just fucking love here. It sounds heavier. Like this version sounds heavier than the new version. Jake's vocals, I love the guy too, like what he does for like mental health, and he just seems like such a cool guy. But there's something about the old production, this style, that I just resonate with a little bit more. It could be nostalgia because I grew up with this style, but I don't know, it sounds a little bit heavier. And August Burns Red, they were a band that, for people in their 30s that are still metalheads in the chat here, back in high school, like everyone loved August Burns Red, at least in my high school. Like it was a very respected band, and the fact that they're still respected and still so consistent today is actually insane. Like there's very few bands in the metalcore space that still sound the way that they did 20 years ago, and they still have a solid fan base. Usually the bands shift their styles or something, but August Burns Red is so incredibly consistent. But bear with me as I gush even more. I'm going to talk about my favorite band, because this record is one of my favorite records of all time. Thrice with Vheissu is now 20 years old too. This is such a cool record. It's a weird one because if you know Thrice, they started off post-hardcore, a little bit metalcore, and then they did a 180 with Vheissu, because their last record, The Artist in the Ambulance, had a lot of metal riffs, breakdowns. Here with Vheissu, it's really not like that. It's like Radiohead with Thrice's DNA. It's a very experimental record. They still go heavy, but this song especially, The Earth Will Shake, is such a cool song.
We dream of ways to break these iron bars. We dream of turtles and a sleeping god. Look to the day, the earth will shake. These weathered walls will fall away. Look to
A lot of people don't. That's why I like to talk about them as much as I can, because I feel like they're still so incredibly underrated, yet their influence is apparent everywhere. Like I literally interviewed Make Them Suffer, and Make Them Suffer even said Thrice is a big inspiration to them. Architects is heavily inspired by Thrice too. It's just a band that people respect and really enjoy, but they're still somewhat underrated. But it's funny because like when we were talking about August Burns Red, it's a band that's been consistent for like 20 years or more, right? Where Thrice, they constantly change their sound with every record. Every record is different, and because of it, a lot of fans have definitely dropped off because they missed the metalcore stuff that they kind of started off with. However, I find that I kind of grew up the same time as like Thrice with their music, that the older I get, the more I appreciate the mellow stuff. So Thrice in 2025, or like at least like their recent singles, I still really like, even though they're like a rock band today. I can still love that old adolescent stuff from 2003 or the stuff from 2024. To give you some context for people that aren't familiar with Thrice, here's like one of their heaviest songs. This is their last record before Vheissu. So yeah, that's how they used to sound, and then after that they make a record like this.
I know one day all our scars will disappear. On that day, all of the scales will swing to sand. But with glorious unbid, strong as we live, we will show.
Yeah, so it's an experimental record. Just one more song. This one's called Of Destinations. This is Architects covering it. But anyway, yeah, I love that record, but let's move on to something else. So what I got here, let's keep it emo and post-hardcore. So Chiodos. Who? Oh, thank you, Village Wolf. So you know the band Destroy Rebuild Until God Shows? They dropped a record last year, but the vocalist Craig Owens, this is his original band and the band that made him famous in the scene. But this song is so cool. Another band that kind of dictated how I view music because they don't have typical structures. Like this song specifically, the words best friend become redefined. How emo is that song title? But I love the point A to point B structure in all the different sections. This riff is still like one of my favorite riffs. It's simple, but I fucking love it. And instead of going to a verse or something, we get this like piano section. So if you're not a fan of emo music, you're not going to like this.
To a chair, we see your breath in the air, but only for angels.
So this is the his other band. So this song came out last year. So just to give you some context, maybe you'll like this a little bit more if you didn't like the Chiodos song.
We still the hunger, come crawl me under, drown me in my sin.
But Chiodos, his old band, is still goated. I think for people who grew up with the sound, they would agree. If you're a newer fan, then yeah, you're probably more like a fan of like Drugs, his other band. But what's another one? I miss these riffs, man. So old school sounding. But next up on the list, Darkest Hour with fucking Undoing Ruin. Just like Thrice, I find Darkest Hour to be incredibly underrated in the scene. This record, Undoing Ruin, and the record afterwards has Chris Norris. I almost said Chuck Norris. Definitely not Chuck Norris. Anyway, this guy was a fucking riff machine. I've always liked that album art too. Yeah, that song's goated to you. Cheetos. You're not the first that's called them Cheetos. Only album from them I have never listened to is their self-titled. There's still a good amount of records that I haven't listened to. Honestly, when Chris Norris left the band, their music hasn't hit quite the same. Although their new record that came out last year that went under like most people's radar was actually really good. But yeah, Chris Norris was only on 2 records, but there's something about his style of riffs and the melodies that he chooses are so uniquely, I don't know, perfect for the band. My personal favorite is Tranquil. This song is fucking killer in my opinion. Then it goes back into that tapping run. See, that's what we're talking about. I feel like a lot of modern metal is there's so much emphasis on the breakdowns and the heavy sections, which are still fun, but dude, melody and riffs and like the musicians actually showing off their chops. There's so much that I loved about the scene back in the day. Now just listening to this stuff makes me appreciate it even more. Let's go to another record. This one is actually going to be quite the curveball because this is not metal in the slightest. Circa Survive actually dropped their debut album, Juturna, in 2005, and this is such a good record, man. Very emo, but it's got such brilliant musicianship at times. The lyrics and the vocals are so unique because Anthony Green has always been one of the most iconic vocalists in post-hardcore. He can be a little bit polarizing, but he's very well respected. This record is so good, man. When I saw them live too, holy shit, these guys can fucking play. I think people will get really fixated on the vocals if they don't like his vocal style, but the instrumentation to this band is really, really good. This has always been one of my favorite songs. It's a song that always stuck with me, but this is Circa Survive with Stop the Fucking Car.
Don't be alarmed, I fear we're falling back to ground. That even if you don't look back, be sure if I'm back to ground.
So Anthony Green, the vocalist, has had issues with drug addiction in the past. He's clean now, but a majority of his lyrics kind of talk about drugs and his addiction with drugs. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he has mentioned that he loved to be high on coke when performing because it just gives him this extra experience, that otherworldly experience when he's performing in front of a crowd. And so when he had to stop doing coke because of how damaging it was for him, it's never been quite the same performing live. Here's one video to show you. Look how fucking high he is in this video.
Don't be alarmed, I fear we're falling back to ground.
Again, the vocals can be a little bit polarizing, but the instrumentation is so fucking good. They're experimental, post-hardcore, really good shit. I realized before I finish off with the last album that I have here, it totally slipped my mind that this record is also 20 years old, and I cannot leave this out. Doppelganger from Fall of Troy is 20 years old. Holy shit. Holy shit. All the people that talk about Swancore and Dance Gavin Dance and all these new bands doing this kind of sound, I feel like they owe so much to Fall of Troy and also At the Drive-In, who started before the Fall of Troy, but this is where the sound originated from.
Slow down, this is slipping through my mind. This conversation has run out of time.
Yeah, it's crazy because the vocalist is also the guitarist, but this has always been my favorite song. Man, this record is so fucking nutty too. It also sounds a little bit like weirdly Led Zeppelin-y at times. Like, it's such a cool record. Our music tastes were different in 2005. Well, it might explain why, like, I'm really into progressive kind of stuff that's not cookie cutter, stuff that is emphasis on great musicianship. And all these bands that I've mentioned, none of them are really cookie cutter by any means. I think probably one of the more safer ones is actually Bullet for My Valentine. And that's probably why they're the biggest, because their music is a little bit more appealing to a bigger audience, where these bands can be a lot more niche. But fuck, I fucking love these bands. Last album that I have on my list, yeah, Trivium with Ascendancy. I literally just heard this record for the first time too recently. It's on patreon.com/metalbirb. Oh my god, there's so much content on Patreon. Oh my god, whoa, Burb, where do I sign up? Link down below. But yeah, I checked out this record. I've heard Rain before, like before the album. Yeah, so I actually never listened to this album back in the day, but I had buddies who were super into Trivium. They just kind of slipped under my radar. Trivium Ascendancy is just like relentless, high energy metalcore, and I definitely appreciate it for that. But I think with newer Trivium, I actually might enjoy it a little bit more at times because I love it when they get progressive and long with their songs, but then have like these big anthem kind of choruses, where Ascendancy is all just like fucking riffy metalcore, but it is sick in that regard. Yeah, so I actually did Shogun too, which is also on patreon.com/metalbirb, but yeah, I did like that one a little bit more because it's a little bit more on the progressive side of things. So yeah, that just speaks to me a little bit more. But I can't lie, these riffs are so fucking sick too. Yeah, like if I listened to this back when I was 15 years old, I would have fucking loved it, man. It reminds me of like Bullet for My Valentine a little bit too, especially with the riffs and the scales that they're using. It's kind of cool looking back at all these records that have aged super well. And the biggest takeaway, these records are full of amazing riffs, unpredictable structures, big hooky choruses. This is why these records have aged like fine wine. 20 years later, they still sound good. I understand with like, you know, production and the mixes might sound a little bit off-putting to some of the newer generation. Still, it's the more the song compositions and how ambitious and creative these bands were and how melodic they were. It makes me kind of hope for the newer bands in the scene to include more melody, more riffs, more focus on the instruments, because metal is about fucking guitar, drums, not just vocals and these big poppy choruses or these breakdowns with disgusting vocals. It's also about the riffs, right? So this was fun. But what is an album that has aged like fine wine to you? So comment down below, spice up my life, because this is going to be on YouTube. So comment, you know, feel free to like, feel free to hit the subscribe button. Helps out the video and the engagement. You know what to do. But on that, thank you for tuning in. Till next time. Peace.